Hi everyone, this is Daniel Cho and welcome to another episode of the Lifestyle is Medicine podcast. I'm here at our North York Lifestyle Medicine Clinic with Dr. George Cho, our medical director, and we're both very excited that you're tuning in.
Hello everyone.
So this episode is titled Blue Zones, Longevity Secrets from the World's Longest Living People. I want to start with the two questions. First, would you like to live to 100 years of age? And if you could, live to 100, what's one thing you'd like to do? So I'm going to pause here and let you think about it for a moment. So, Dr. Cho, let's start with you. Would you like to live to 100? And if so, what's one thing you'd like to accomplish?
For sure, I'd love to live to 100. And if I was to accomplish something, I guess one goal I would have is maybe to write a textbook on lifestyle medicine.
Okay. I'd also love to live to 100. Actually, that's one of my life goals. If I could, I think it'd be really cool to see multiple generations. You know, not just your grandkids, but great and maybe even great and great grandkids, and sort of, you know, pass on the experiences and knowledge that you've gained.
Oh, that's really cool.
Yeah, over the years. Now, my guess is that most people want to live for as long as possible. I think most of us, we fear death, and especially as we get older. So I think intuitively and deep inside, we all want to live long, and maybe even forever. But I think living to 100 may not sound appealing to some of us, because when we think of old age, we think of, you know, losing our memory, degenerating in a nursing home, losing our independence, and struggling with a debilitating chronic disease. But here's the thing. What if we could live vibrant lives well into our 90s and even into 100? That would be amazing, and that's what this episode is all about. There are people around the world who live very vibrant, active, and healthy lives into their 8th, 9th, and even 10th decades of life. And we're going to learn about their lifestyle habits that enable them to do so. So to start off, what is a blue zone?
Well, blue zones are geographic areas that have a large number of centenarians.
And what or who are centenarians?
Yeah, centenarians are people who live to 100 years old or older. So in these so-called blue zones, there's a relatively large proportion of people, or a number of people, whose lives are measured at least up to a century long.
Wow, that's, to say a century long, it just sounds so long. The word century. But yeah, that's incredible. These people live to 100 or more, and these areas have a high proportion of them. So where did the name blue zones come from? I mean, why not red zones or purple zones? Why are we talking about blue zones?
Yeah, well, it was created by, the term was coined by Dan Buettner, who is from the National Geographic, and him and his team. And basically the story goes that, you know, they're looking for geographic areas with a large number of people who have who live to 100, and basically once they found these areas, they start to draw blue circles around them, and hence the blue zone. So there's nothing really scientific about them or anything like that. It's just the research team kind of made that term up.
I see. So before we go to these blue zones, let's just try to get a reference point here. What currently is the average lifespan of Canadians?
Yeah, well, according to, if you look at the Statistics Canada website, from 2007 to 2009, according to their data, the life expectancy for males in Canada is about 79 years old.
Okay. And
if you're looking at females, it's about 83 years old. And specifically in Ontario, where we are right now, the life expectancy is about the same. Men live to about 79 years old, and women about 84.
Okay, and then just as another reference, how about in the United States? Do we know?
Yeah, in the U.S., women live to about 81.1 years, and men about 76.1 years.
So Canadians do better than the U.S.
That's right, yes.
Okay.
Yeah, a few years.
Yes.
Yeah.
So Dan Buettner found 5 blue zones.
That's right.
4 of them are outside of North America. Can you let our listeners know where these are?
Sure, yeah. He found 4 of them outside North America, 1 in North America. The ones outside were found in Okinawa, Japan, Sardinia, Italy, Icaria, Greece, and Nicoya, Nicaragua.
Awesome. And so we're going to go through each one of them, and we're not going to talk about the North American blue zone in this episode. We'll talk about that in our next episode. So we hope that you'll be able to tune in for that to find out here in North America, there actually is a blue zone. We have some of the longest living people in the world, which, you know, if you think about it, actually pretty amazing. You know, despite all the health problems that we have here, and, you know, our issues of our unhealthy, you know, so-called obesogenic environment, we have some of the longest living people. So we'll be talking about them in our next episode. So for each of these locations, we are going to discuss different people that the National Geographic team met. And we will use them sort of as case studies on the different lifestyle behaviors that promote longevity in these individuals. So let's first go to Japan. Who in Okinawa did the team meet?
Sure, yeah. In Okinawa, the Dan Buehner, he recalls meeting an individual, an old lady named Gozai Shinzato. And the way he tells the story is that as he was coming up to meet her and visit her house, she was outside ripping weeds with a hoe. And then after she had done some of that, she went on her knees, put on some knee pads, and started pulling the weeds out with her own hands. And the amazing thing is that she was about close to 100 at this point.
Yeah, you don't see many 90-year-olds in Canada using a hoe.
No, that's right. Most Canadians, you know, by their 90s, they're bedridden or stuck in nursing homes. Most of them are passed away, actually, by the time. Now, most of us don't reach 90.
Yeah. But
even like in the 80s, we're, you know, in nursing homes. We're suffering from a chronic disease, bedridden, something like that. But, you know, in Okinawa, they have approximately 5 times as many centenarians as most other places. And
wow.
A lot of these centenarians are like Gozai Shinzato. They're very healthy, very vigorous. And this is common across the different blue zones that we'll be talking about, that they are people who live to 100, but they're very active and very healthy.
So, yeah, let's talk about what makes him so vibrant, and why don't we start with diet? What did Dan Buehner and his team learn from the diet of the Okinawans?
Well, the Okinawans traditionally eat a very simple diet. Some of the staples in the diet are seaweed, sweet potatoes, bitter melon, garlic, of course rice, shiitake mushrooms, tofu. Some of the common spices they use are things like turmeric. And turmeric's very interesting because turmeric is a very powerful anti-inflammatory herb. But lots of these foods their diet is actually composed of whole foods, and they're actually very plant-based.
And what are some other lifestyle characteristics that of these Okinawans?
Yeah, they have some very interesting habits that they do that Dan Buehner believed promotes some of their longevity, and I tend to agree. And some of the interesting ones was, for instance, they have interesting habits or things that they do to avoid overeating. So, for instance, they will serve on a smaller plate or a smaller bowl, and instead of serving food at the table, they actually have a separate table where the food is served, and then they get their food and then they bring it to another table where they eat. So this kind of prevents overeating because the food's not just right in front of you, right? You don't have to, like the seconds, you have to get up and get your seconds. So this kind of promotes less overeating. And they also have this ritual saying that they repeat before meals, and it's called harahachibu. And it's a saying which means eat until you're 8/10 full or 80% full. So it's very interesting because, you know, how many times here in North America do we repeat, hey guys, let's eat until we're 80% full? No one says that, right?
Right.
But, you know, before their meals, they actually say something that reminds them of the importance of not eating until you're 100% full, right? So this is very that was very, very interesting. So those are some very interesting interesting habits that Dan points out.
Did they also find something about physical activity?
Yeah, physical activity is incorporated into their lifestyle. And of course, by the example of Gozai Shinzato, it's very clear that she's been very active for much of her life, right? And so they live a kind of a rural type of life where they have to engage with nature, so weeding and hoeing and things like that. And another interesting thing he points out is that they actually, in the Asian culture, right, and in Okinawa, they sit cross-legged.
Right.
So pretty much whenever they get up, they're doing a squat. Right. So that's
Yeah, right.
So I mean, just even and like how many times do you have to get up and sit down and up every day? I mean, it's multiple times, right? So can you imagine you're doing multiple amounts of squats every single day, and these are 80-year-olds, 70-year-olds, 90-year-olds doing this. So physical activity is incorporated into their lifestyle. Obviously, these Okinawan centenarians aren't going to the gym. At least most of them aren't, right? But lifestyle as activity is incorporated into their daily life, and that's how they stay fit.
Now, in his book, The Blue Zones, Dan Buettner mentions that the Okinawans have something called a moai. Can you tell us about moais and how they might contribute to longevity?
Yeah, moais are very interesting, and I think we here in the West can learn a lot from these moai. So a moai is a social group of friends who grow up together from a very young age, and they are there to support each other all throughout life. And since there's nothing like Facebook or social media that these centenarians really participate in, these moais, they meet in person. And sometimes some of these they meet daily, and they sip tea and they talk together, they gossip together. So these are very in-person types of relationships and support groups. In fact, Dan Buettner relates of one moai of about 5 or 6 women who've been together for about 90 something years.
Wow.
So pretty much if you do the math, because the average age of that moai is about 105 or something like that. But anyways, pretty much they've been together since they were like around 5 years old. So I mean, these are very strongly bonded groups, and they last for a very long time. So one lesson I think we can really learn here is the importance of interpersonal contact and having a strong and lasting support group throughout life. And right now in the West, we are so individualistic and disconnected from each other. Yeah. We expect to separate one day from even those who we consider to be close friends.
Right.
There's kind of this understanding that one day we will separate and lose contact with each other, right? Staying closely connected with a group of people with whom we can share our burdens and cares all throughout life is really definitely rare in our society. But the lessons that these Okinawan moais teach us is that how important it is to really have a close network of people that we can really open up to, share our burdens, and to hear their burdens, and to really stay socially connected.
Yeah, I think I read recently that they've done studies in Americans, I think, about how many friends they have, and I think the average was something like one close friend that you could really share with. But here we have a group of 5, and they've been together for 90 plus years, and we really are very isolated in many ways, despite some of the social media and networking opportunities that we have. We don't really form intimate friendships.
That's right. I mean, I think it's important to point out that these are in-person support groups, right? So yes, we stay connected through Facebook and Instagram and these other things, but there's nothing like interpersonal direct connections with people face to face, right?
For sure.
I think these moais really reinforce that. So right.
So now let's go to Greece, Ikaria, Greece. And there, Dan Buettner met a very interesting individual who actually experienced a dramatic example of basically lifestyle medicine. So can you tell us about him and some of the lessons we can learn?
Sure, yeah. This is a very interesting story. In Icaria, Greece, Dan Buettner and his team, they met an individual named Stomides Moriadis. And pretty much this guy, he grew up in Icaria, Greece, but then he moved to Detroit, Michigan to start a new life, like many people do. They come to the West. But unfortunately, at the age of 66, he was diagnosed with lung cancer. And the prognosis was not good at all. The doctors, they pretty much told him that he had a very short time to live. So, but instead of, accepting his doomed fate, Stomides, he actually moved back to Icaria, Greece. And he went back on his traditional Icarian food. He was breathing the fresh mountain air. And he got better. He got healthier. And in fact, he was still alive over 30 years past his diagnosis.
Wow. So yeah, that's amazing. So he far outlasted the prognosis that the doctors had given him.
Right.
And a big part of that was undoubtedly the lifestyle he experienced in Icaria. You mentioned that he went back to his original diet, things like that. So can you share with us some important things that Buettner learned from the Icarians?
Sure, yeah. Well, first of all, Icaria, Greece is a very rural community. It's very mountainous. So when Stomides was there, he was breathing very fresh air, and he was doing a lot of walking, hiking up and down the hilly mountains of Greece. So he was getting a lot of exercise when he was there. Also, the diet is very plant-based. They eat very little meat, and importantly, when they do eat meat, a lot of it is home cooked. So they're not going to getting burgers at McDonald's and stuff like that, right? They're cooking their meat at home if they're eating it, but meat is not a major part of their diet, right? Their diets are mostly plant-based.
Just like the Okinawans.
That's right, and that's a common theme across these blue zones.
So what would you say is the big takeaway that we could learn from the Icarian lifestyle?
Well, like the Okinawans, the diet is a big lesson. So eating mostly plant-based and cooking at home is really important. And I also think examples of stories like Stomides gives us a ray of hope that when we change our lifestyle, it can have powerful effects on our bodies. So if you think about it, he was diagnosed with lung cancer and given only a few months to live. But by changing his lifestyle, he was able to outlast that diagnosis, or at least the prognosis he was given. He was still alive 36 years later to tell a story to a researcher. So I think his story tells us about how important lifestyle is and how powerful that actually has, how powerful an effect that has on your body.
Yeah, isn't there, doesn't Dan Buettner write about the fact that he actually outlived the doctors?
Right. In fact, yes, that's right. Dan Buettner, he recalls that he called him later after they had met, because Stomides had said that he was going to go back to the States to get retest his lungs. And so Buettner called him again and said, hey, so what did the doctors say? And Stomides, he said nothing, because all the doctors were dead. So this means that Stomides had outlived even the very doctors that pronounced his death. So he was very healthy, and that's attributed to his change in lifestyle.
Wow, that's lifestyle medicine right there.
That's right. Yeah, and a powerful example of that.
All right, so let's now go to Sardinia, Italy. So who did Dan Buettner meet in Sardinia, and what are some lessons we could learn from the Sardinians?
Sure. Well, one person that he mentions in his book is an individual named Tonino Tola, and he was a 75-year-old shepherd. And if you take a look at his picture, he looks very strong at the age of 75. And in fact, you could go on the internet and search him and see pictures of him chopping and carrying wood. And even at that age, Buettner, he recalls how he can still carry 2 sheep under both arms. So he was a very vibrant, healthy individual. And like most other blue zone areas, I know that can contribute a lot to his diet. Again, just like in Ikaria, Greece, and Okinawa, these Sardinians are eating whole foods, plant-based diets. And they also live very active lifestyles as well. Like the Icarians, they walk everywhere and they do active physical labor. And one thing that really stood out among the Sardinians, one characteristic, is that how they treat their elderly. So unlike here in America, where your social capital decreases as you age, in Sardinia it actually goes up. Sardinian elderly individuals are very well respected, and importantly, they also remain close to their families. So this connectedness gives them a sense of purpose and tends to prolong life. On the other hand, when people are disconnected from their family or close relationships, then it tends to they don't do so well. They deteriorate a little bit faster.
Yeah, I think of how many of the elderly here, they end up in seniors' homes or nursing homes, and I'm sure the family goes to visit, but it obviously there's a separation there, and you can't help but wonder if that might affect their health in a negative way.
Right. Yeah. And these Sardinian elderly people, they're at home, they're taking care of the grandkids, and Dan Buettner actually talks about how that connectedness also is good for the kids growing up as well, because they have someone that's always there with them, someone that's taking care of them. So it's good for the kids as well.
Just another authority figure around, to
right
to mentor. And,
yeah.
Great. So let's go to our final blue zone, Nicoya, Nicaragua. And so who did Dan Buettner meet here, and what are some lessons we can learn?
Yeah, so in Nicoya, Nicaragua, Dan Buettner met an old lady, and the story goes that as he was coming up to visit her house, she was using a 4-foot-long machete, to cut some of the jungle brush that was kind of invading onto her property. So she was there with a 4-foot-long machete cutting branches as he was coming up to meet her. And then he also talks about how when she got tired of the interviews, she went and showed him her kitchen. And inside the fridge, there was only a few items, no packaged food. It was some cheese, tomatoes, some bags of rice, things like that, onions and garlic. And then when it was time for lunch, she started to cook lunch, but she doesn't cook like most of us. She was preparing tortillas, but she made the tortilla, the bread, all by herself. She was rolling it out all by herself. She was making the stew and all that things all from scratch. No pre-made taco sauces or whatever, cheese and all that kind of stuff. It was all pre-made. I mean, all made by her own hands. So she had prepared them a whole foods, most plant-based meal. So yeah, that's who he met at Nicoya.
What's striking to me is that all these individuals you mentioned sound very independent. So
yes,
they can
that's
cook
right.
for themselves. They could take care of their home. They're moving around. They're taking care of sheep,
using machetes.
So they sound very independent,
Yeah.
which is in contrast to many of the seniors here who become very dependent as we get older.
Right, that's right. I mean, a lot of seniors by the age they're like 85, in their 80s they start to become dependent, but these are
even earlier than that.
yeah,
too.
exactly, even earlier. But
Yeah.
all these people are close to 100, and they're very independent. Yeah. In fact, the lady at Nicoya, she's still into dancing and things like that, even at that old age.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
So what are some of the main takeaways for our listeners from these blue zone population? What are the common features that make them so vibrant into such a late age?
Yeah, I think there are a few very important takeaways. First is the diet. These centenarians are eating whole foods, plant-based diets. Their diets are plant-based. There's very little meat in their diets. In fact, Buettner, he recalls that usually most of these people, they're eating meat mostly maybe once a month, at most maybe once a week, some of them only on special occasions, which is very different from the way we eat here. Most people, or at least a lot of people, they eat meat every single meal.
Right.
Yeah. So, but these centenarians that's not how they eat. Also, they cook most of their food by themselves. Very, very little processed food in their diet. So, and very interesting, actually, Buettner points out that these centenarians, they eat high carb diets. So in fact, the Okinawan diet is usually about like 80% carbs, which kind of goes against some of the misconceptions, or at least some of the theory out there right now in the Western world where carbs are bad for you, right? But these long-lived centenarians, they eat a lot of carbs, but of course they eat the right type of carbs. These are whole grain, complex carbohydrates. So the diet is one big thing. Another thing is they have physical activity incorporated into their lifestyle, into their daily life, whether it's getting up and down like the Okinawans, or dealing or gardening. A lot of them have gardens, things like that. So physical activity is something that's part of their daily life. Yeah, and then a third thing is they stay socially connected, whether it's through the moais or staying close to the family, like the Sardinians. These people are staying connected with each other through strong interpersonal relationships, staying close to the family, these types of things. So those are some of important takeaways from the lives of these centenarians, and a lot of them are there out in nature.
Right. Yeah. Close to nature.
The Icarian, the hills of Greece, the hills of Sardinia, by the lakes in Nicoya. These people are stay in close contact with nature.
Yeah, the interesting thing is that all these things that you mentioned are lifestyle related. They're not, Dan Buettner didn't find that they were taking a pill,
Right.
Going to the doctor all the time. These are lifestyle factors that give them such longevity.
Right, that's correct. And that's why it's so fitting to discuss the blue zones on this podcast and why it's so relevant to our listeners. There's no miracle prescription or herb that's going to prolong life, right? Instead, it's a combination of various lifestyle factors that come together to give somebody a better chance at living a long, healthy, active, and vibrant life. So it's important that we ourselves start practicing many of these same behaviors. So, we have the power to choose to cook our own food. We have the power to eat more whole foods, eat more plant-based, decrease the amount of meat in our diet. We have the power to live a more active lifestyle and to invest more time into our social relationships. So a lot of these things we can do ourselves.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much for taking us on that world tour of the Blue Zones. We end our tour next episode in North America. So we're going to look at who are these North Americans who live so long and such healthy lives. So we invite you to tune in next episode to find out. And as always, please share your comments and leave us a rating. And also please share this podcast with a family or friend who you think could benefit from the simple yet powerful principles of lifestyle medicine. So you've been listening to the Lifestyle is Medicine podcast. Thank you so much for joining us today. Hope you tune in next time.